Okay, everybody, welcome to tonight's webinar. Thanks for joining us. This is the first of three in our technical official development series for 2022. First off, I acknowledge the Wongal people as the traditional custodians of the land, sea and community in which I'm situated. And I pay my respects to all First Nations people and our community elders, past, present and emerging. On behalf of the Swimming New South Wales TSC, welcome once again, and I'm looking forward to introducing you to our three panelists this evening. And thank you very much to our panelists, Andrew, Brad and Faye, for joining us, and thanks for your time preparing and your expertise that you're here tonight. First, I've just got a couple of housekeeping points to make. So this session will be recorded, as you are aware, and please keep yourself on mute for the session. You've got the opportunity to ask questions via the chat feature. So just type your questions in and I'll get to them as soon as possible throughout everyone's presentation. And so therefore, hopefully we can answer your questions while it's still relevant in that discussion. And the idea of this method is that we can make the session as interactive as possible via your questions without having audio clashes and delays, etc., when two people are speaking at once. So if a presenter wants you to come off mute to discuss your question more, they can ask you to do so. So tonight, quickly, will be delivered in two parts. So part one will be our three presenters talking about their experiences in dealing with protests and juries of appeal. So the TSC approach these three as they represent a really good cross-section of experience in regards to officiating within Swimming New South Wales events. Andrew Ridley is a new official to Swimming New South Wales level events and is actually part of our referee course this year. Brad Fahey is still also, I guess, relatively new, but has attained referee status and is on our level 2 pathway. And Faye Lewis, as most, if not all of you would know, is a FINA level referee and has a wealth of knowledge on everything officiating. So we've got a good cross-section of how each person has dealt with, in their limited or extensive time with protests and juries of appeal. So yeah, they'll talk to you about their experiences and it will allow you to compare how each of them have dealt with these scenarios. And Faye will also discuss preparation and consistency when you're faced with these kinds of situations. And then quickly, part two will be great. So as well as being a swimming official, Andrew is actually the head coach of the Australian Mens Goalball team, which is a Paralympic sport. So Andrew has recently been overseas at, I believe, the World Championships. And he will talk with us about how goalball is run with a focus on officiating. So just the levels and the level of professionality, I guess, with the officials and how it works. Just generally the dynamics of goalball and how the officials work with the coaches and players and anything he'd like to discuss, because it'd be quite interesting regardless. So, and Andrew is also a level 1 goalball official, I believe, which is also very handy. So we'll get stuck into part one now. So talking about protests and juries of appeal. So we'll start with you, Andrew.
Great, thanks, Josh. Yeah, it was our regional championships in goalball. We'll get to that. Unfortunately, we didn't do well enough to make the world championships, but more about that later. So I realise I'm speaking to a lot of very experienced people, maybe some of whom will have been through many juries of appeal, either potentially some of them appealing themselves as coaches or being on a panel or actually having a protest obviously against their decision. So all I'm going to do is just tell you about my one experience. And actually my one experience was in my very first New South Wales meet as an official. I'd never been to a New South Wales meet before. I plucked up the courage to go along, and next thing you know, Chris Hayes, who I think is on this call, has approached me. I was sitting there at Joss 1, I just sat down after a race, and he said, need you to come and sit on a jury of appeal. So me being me, I immediately said, yep, fine. So I guess the first thing was, why did I get chosen? I do wonder that, but I was sitting in JOS 1, and it was at country championships, and the first thing that I guess I was made aware of is that they needed to find an official for the panel, so a technical official for the panel who was not from the country. So they are, I guess, the key reasons why I was chosen. So then I went in. There were three of us. So Peter Shell, who's obviously very experienced, he, I guess, chaired it, if you want. I'm not sure, Faye, what the technical word is, but he was the person in charge, and also one of the coaches. So one of the other coaches was selected, obviously, by Chris. And I guess the first thing there is to say to all of you, whether you've been in one or not, and especially if you haven't been in a jury of appeal, it's a very valuable thing to be in. In anything you do, every meet you go to, you learn things. I'm always open to learning, and I always learn things, but it certainly accelerated my learning and understanding of being a technical official in the sport. So being new, I was taken through the process by Peter as to what would actually happen. And a key message was, it's about getting the decision right for the swimmer. So what that means to me is, if at any stage there is a appeal against the decision I made, I should not be precious about it, or concerned about it. The most important thing is getting the decision right for the swimmer. And if it turns out that a protest against me is upheld because I've made a wrong decision, I'm sure it won't be easy. I'm sure some of you may have been in that situation, but I really hope that I have that mindset of, well, the decision is right for the swimmer, so that's a good thing. So that was certainly something Peter said. It's about getting it right. So then we had some short meetings with three people. So the decision was around starting before the starter signal. There was a protest against that. The referee, very experienced level 3 referee. I think John was the referee, I think Chris, and not the starter. So we had the opportunity to ask him some questions, and then the starter, I can't remember if that was the correct order, it might have been the starter first and then the referee, and then the coach, so the person who actually made the protest. So we were encouraged by Peter to ask any questions around, to really validate what they saw. So the referee and the starter, so what they saw, did what they see align? So one of the things, I guess, I wasn't really aware of was what questions to ask, but apparently when it comes to these things, a popular question to ask is what colour cap did the swimmer have? So a lesson there again for me is, when you see an infraction, as getting down as much details as you can. You may not share all of that detail immediately up front with the referee, who may accept, obviously, the infraction, ask you to write it up, but you've still got all that information there in case of a protest. And I guess one of the things I wasn't sure about is, given a cap is one thing that identifies a swimmer, and therefore can potentially identify which lane they're in, because the idea of that was to validate which lane the swimmer was in as well, is what else can you ask? And maybe that's something that Faye might comment on a little bit later, or some of the more experienced people on this panel is, so can you ask about the colour of a swimsuit? I don't know. Can you ask about skin colour? That's not one I was going to ask. And I guess, given bias or potential bias, that, I guess, I'll be interested to hear what I think Faye says about potentially something like that later. So what questions can you ask? But really what we're looking for there is, are the stories consistent? And then obviously from the protesters, why did you protest? Why did you feel that it wasn't, that your swimmer should not have been disqualified? And in this case, the coach said that his swimmer, who was in lane 1, he didn't believe that his swimmer started first. He believed that the swimmer in lane 0 went first. So that was the grounds for his appeal, that the referee and the starter had got the wrong person. And that was an interesting one for me, because I know that I don't think it was that meet, or maybe it was. Actually, maybe it was that meet. I actually disqualified someone. Oh, sorry, I didn't disqualify someone. I went to the referee with an infraction, so being Joss 1, and said that the swimmer in lane 2, and it's the essay, of course, given them on the referee's course, it's going to hurt, but it's head did not break the surface of the water before the arms turned inward at the widest part of the second stroke. And so I got asked, well, how far under the water was the head when they took that second arm stroke, or the arms turned inward? I said about 30 to 40 centimeters, so it was very significant. So he accepted it and asked me to go and write it up. So I went into the room and tapped away for the first time was about to tap away for the first time on the iPad. But when I got in there, I know I'd said lane 2, but immediately I realized that as I looked at my program, that lane 1 and lane 0 were empty. And I was very clear in my head that it was not the outermost swimmer who had actually done the infraction. There was a swimmer outside them. So while I said lane 2, it was actually lane 3. So I stood there very meekly and waited for the referee to come in. He came in. Have you written it up? I said, no, I've made a mistake. I gave you the wrong lane. Clearly now I cannot correct that. So I can't proceed. And he agreed, said no problems, and went off. We had a chat about it later, given I'm obviously learning. And, well, lead referee, I should know better as a Joss to get something like that wrong. But he said the inspector of turns in lane 3 also came up to him about exactly that same infraction. However, the inspector of turns said that they were a few inches underneath the water, and he deemed it, or a few centimetres, he deemed it so close that he did not accept it. But what it, I guess, confirmed to me that it was actually lane 3. But again, he was very clear, just around the same as a protest, that it's important to get it right for the swimmer. So he had no hesitation at all as a referee of actually reinstating that swimmer, because he had been called out as being disqualified. So a little bit of a side issue there, but again, just taking notes, being clear, and certainly the cap colour for me is an important one to remember going forward. So then we went and looked at the video. All 3 of us, so it was Peter, the other panelist, and myself. And the key thing about the video is to look very, very carefully. Don't assume anything when you actually look at the video if you have the opportunity to look at the video. And in this case, the video was near the start. It was up, pointing down, but it was what had happened. Sorry. First thing we were told was there was no noise, so we would not be able to hear the starting signal. The video was actually angled down. It was in a reasonably good position, just a couple of meters from the starting end, looking across the pool. But because it was angled down, at first glance, it looked like lane 0, as the coach had said, had actually gone first. Move first. But then when we looked very closely, because of the angle of the camera, we could actually see that was lane 1. It wasn't lane 0. We could see the feet of lane 0 and the starting platform as lane 0. You could just see their toes. So what we were actually looking at was not lane 0, as presumably the coach had thought he was. But we were actually looking at lane 1. And from what we could see, clearly we couldn't see anything about lane 0, apart from their feet, and we couldn't see their feet move. All we could see based on the evidence was that lane 1 had moved first. We didn't know whether it was before the sound, of course, but lane 1 had moved first. The key message there is don't assume anything. You have to look very carefully at the video. And of course, the video may not have all of the information. I believe subsequently the camera angle was sort of corrected so that you would have been able to see everything. So the appeal was, the protest was thrown out. There was no evidence to go against the referee and the starter, whose signals were both consistent. The final point here, and pretty embarrassed to say this because I've been on many committees for sports clubs and things, and I always believe in the sanctity of a committee, and regardless of what the decision is, and even if you don't agree with it, in this case clearly I did, we all were very much in agreement, is not to discuss it outside of that, because you don't know who you're talking to. I was asked by another official on the pool deck, what happened? Said no, it was clear. But I made the comment, which I shouldn't have, that I just didn't know why he'd actually protested it based on the evidence, because he'd seen the video. At which point the person, so the official I was speaking to, said, the reason they were asking was because it was their daughter or son, whichever it was, that was the one who actually did the false start. I mean, that was all I'd said, so it wasn't terrible, but of course you don't want it to go back to the referee, so go back to the person who'd made the protest. So I went back to Chris Hayes and said, I'm very sorry, here's what's happened. He said, good lesson for you. No harm done, but there's an important lesson there is, there's a decision being made. You can give the result of the decision to whoever asks, but really there's nothing more to say after that. So I think I saw Chris on the call. So once again, Chris, apologies for that. The key message there, probably the key message is say yes if you get the opportunity. If you never had it, even if you had it, say yes. You'll learn more, or maybe you know everything, unlike me. Whether you're protesting on a panel, being protested against, be comfortable with it. We all make mistakes, and the most important thing is that it's the right decision for the swimmer. And then finally, take those notes. And Brett Patrick, who's sort of one of the technical people, or the person in charge of Metro Northeast, the technical officials, strongly encourages me in my learning to take lots of notes. So I hope I haven't rabbited on too long there, Josh.
No, that's perfect. That's perfect. Thanks, Andrew. That's really good. We'll move on to Brad. If you guys do have any questions, shoot me a question via the chat if you want, and we can catch up with questions for Andrew afterwards. But just send it through to me if you want, and and any questions for Brad during his presentation, put it into put it through as well. But over to you, Brad.
Yeah, so I was just looking at a few of the names here in the webinar, and I know a few people. People will know me. So just about me, for those that don't know. So as Josh said before, I'm a level 2 pathway official. So I've been involved for about 5 years, probably in the New South Wales arena for probably 4 without checking. So just on me, like I've done 2 out of the 3 level 2 starters, like a pre-assessment suitability and a first assessment. I've done a level 2 pre-assessment referee, and I'm doing another first assessment next weekend at Junior State. So probably just, it's a good segue following on from Andrew, because in the jury process, I mean, I've got the rules in front of me, and I mean, when I did the referee course a couple of years ago when I came through to level 1 there, and as a learning official, there's actually a bit of dark art about protest. Like there's lots and lots of stuff in the rules about strokes, how to officiate all the form strokes and the like, and there's lots of things in that regard. But looking at the rules for protests here, it basically just says, paraphrasing, protest gets submitted to the referee in writing with $100 within 30 minutes. And that's it. And then the referee considers a protest and then can reject it or reinstate the swimmer, as Andrew was sort of talking about before. And then other than that, you go to a jury. And the jury is then made up of 3 relevant people, depending on the meet. So in my experience that I'll share now, I was the witness, so to speak. So I was the reporting official, and I've been involved in 2 at a state level. So for me, really, and I'll just talk about my 2 specific experiences. So my first one, and I do a lot of the state, I try to go to most of the metro and state stuff. So my first one was actually as an inspector returns at senior state finals. So from memory, I think I was maybe on about lane 6, and there was a 400 individual medley in the final. So I think from memory, it was the first return breaststroke turn. So the 100-meter return leg. So for me, standing on top, what I saw was clear in my eyes. It was a non-simultaneous touch, left hand, right hand. It did happen quite quick, and the swimmer turned away towards the western side of the grandstand, if you know SOPAC, and kept swimming. So I got the attention of the chief IIT pretty quick, and went over to the referee. On the way over, I'd already written some pretty clear notes. I just drew a diagram as I saw it, sort of a left and a right stroke with a bit of separation. And when I reported to the referee, I was very clear. He did ask me questions, how far apart, left, right, and it was half an inch. So it was very close, but for me, I saw it and I reported it. So I just did my job as an official. Then the referee then came to me about probably half an hour later, and I said, "Brad, you got a sec?" And we went and had a chat in the corridor quickly. And he said to me that the swimmer is and the representative have protested in the correct manner. Can I just confirm to you what you saw? I actually showed him the diagram. I had him a program, and he said, "Yeah, that's all good. Leave it with me." So he then, based on what I saw at the time, he then rejected the protest. Then it went to jury. So a little bit of background there, like as Andrew was saying, in the jury, it's made up of 3. So on this particular occasion, there was a TSC member, another referee, and there's a representative of the coach, and there's a board member as well that was in there too. So the coach was known to me of the swimmer. The bit of background behind it, they'd actually finished 4th, so they actually didn't medal. So I'd suspected at the time that they might have swum a national time, and that's why they were protesting. There's always a reason for a protest, as Andrew was saying before. You don't really know, but there's always a reason why someone is going to protest. So I was just told that there was a protest on foot. One of the board members, I think, came and told me, or the TSC member, that I'll need to go and give some evidence shortly. So yeah, as Andrew was saying, a lot of, I think, what happens, I've never been a referee in a protest or been on a jury as a panelist of 3, but from what I can observe in the order, I was in there last. So pretty much when I walked in, I knew that they had reviewed video footage. I didn't get to see the footage. The footage, I think, was taken from up in the top of the Western Grandstand. So if some of you came to the forum, there is some footage that gets recorded I think, on some of the higher level meets. So whether that was the actual footage, but I was told that there was some footage reviewed, even before I'd said anything. And then they just asked me what I'd saw. So I was very, very clear. In some respects, I felt that the decision had somewhat maybe already been made. But then I just replayed the infraction as I told the referee. I basically said, look, as the swimmer was incoming, observed them from the 5 metre lane, 5 metre mark, looked down, left hand, right hand, non-simultaneous touch just below the waterline. They retracted their right hand back, faced the western side of the grandstand, and then went for the next lap. So very, very clear. That's pretty much how it was said, all of about 30 seconds. And the jury said to me, thank you, Brad, that was very clear. And I walked out of the room. And then later, the jury had come and told me that the swimmer had been reinstated. The video was reviewed. The turn was very, very quick, and I agree it was very quick, and it all happened quite fast. So, so the swimmer was basically reinstated for the benefit of the doubt. So, as Andrew was saying before, is that the right decision for the swimmer? Yeah, I was okay with that. That was fine with me. Happened quite quick, so I was fine with that. And the referee and myself were on the same page. So everything that I reported to the referee, it was exactly the same language used in the jury process. So we were on the same page. So the feedback for there was that referee and official were saying the same thing. And from my perspective, my take on the decision was benefit of the doubt, reinstate the swimmer. And that's what the process is for. And I was okay. So I wasn't daunted by that. And I thought I was very, very prepared for that one. Now, second to that, this is the exact opposite, my second experience. So the second experience I had was actually at a starter at the junior state long course. Now I was actually doing my level 2 pre-assessment for that as well. So a little bit of background with that. It was the 4x50 metre relay event, started before the starting signal. It was the very last event on the program. It was the fastest heat, they were in lane 4. So they just started before the starting signal. So straight away, I went and consulted the referee. I stepped down from the starting platform. The referee actually took one step back, and the two of us concurred immediately. So the result there was a disqualification. And the background for that, as I think I just alluded to, was that they finished first in the time final. And then, as I was saying before about the protest rules about paying $100 within 30 minutes of the announcement, I think it was within 30 seconds. So as the starter and the referee, when you sit in front of the control room there at SOPAC, there was two $50 notes came down from the grandstand thrown over the railing. So straight away, we just knew that there was going to be a protest. The coach was already on pool deck looking up at the parents, and the coach was saying, could you see any movement at the start there? There was nothing obvious. And then the next thing you know, there was two pineapples on the ground. So straight away we thought, okay, here we go, protest. So the background for that one is, yes, swimmer was disqualified, protest was lodged straight away, and as part of the rules there, you can't protest the decision of fact, but you can protest the decision of the referee. So as a start before the starting signal, it's good as a referee at starter because you do need two people to observe the infraction. So that's a decision of fact from the point of view of a referee and a starter, but there's nothing stopping the protest being lodged against the decision. So again, go into the jury room, and then I was last, and Faye was actually on this jury. And don't forget, I was getting assessed as well, as I said. So because it was the last event, usually what happens is there's a couple of referees and there's a coach's representative. Now, all the other coaches had gone. So the coach in protest, he was actually looking for a representative. So one of the officials is actually also a coach. So he hung around and acted as the coach's representative. So really for me there, and there was almost a line of questioning that Andrew was talking about before. So I remember some of the questioning in that one, and I just wasn't prepared at all, even though I knew 100% it was an infraction. And I later actually went home and watched the video because it was live streamed on Swim TV, and I recorded it on the television, and then later on spoke to the referee about it the next day, so you could see it straight away. So I was very confident, but I just wasn't prepared. So some of the questions that were asked of me from memory, and I've just got them here, was what made you report? And I said something like, they were the only one that moved. So not my best hour. And described what they did. And I can see Faye laughing already. And I think I said something like they moved forward. But I couldn't actually describe really what I was trying to articulate. So some of my best work there, I actually was sitting in the chair and I motioned forward on the whole chair as the swimmer would do so, starting on the blocks. So straight away, I was just like, you know what, this is about to get derailed. And I started to get a little bit frustrated in myself because I just wasn't giving clear enough answers, and I just couldn't get that point across properly. So I actually started to think myself, I'm about to derail this thing, even though I know it's a given infraction, and the swimmer might actually be reinstated on the basis of what I'm saying. So the jury later informed me that the disqualification remained, and as part of some of the review evidence that was in the jury, well, I think there was some mobile phone footage or some footage of some description that was reviewed, and one of the people on the panel could actually see the movement. So if it wasn't for that little bit of additional evidence, because you can utilise whatever evidence you've got, and the referee should also do that before it goes to jury if they think it's a given and should be reinstated. So I got some really good lessons out of that one in particular. So in a bit of self-reflection for me, it was about being more prepared, sorry, and being on the same page as the referee, and just don't feel the silence. So someone asks you a question, just provide an answer rather than sort of filling some of the gaps. So how that's sort of put me in as a better official on a level 2 pathway. So, I mean, a jury experience and becoming a better starter. So Andrew actually said it, what colour is the swim cap? I mean, in that starter experience of a jury, they actually did ask the referee what made you think or the like, and the referee said the cap was white or something like that. I mean, in my mind, I probably knew what the swim cap colour was, but I didn't write it down. I knew what the swimsuit colour probably was, but again, I didn't write it down. So now I write those things down if I'm remembering enough when I sit down after the start. And then what part of the swimmer actually moved? Did they move forward? Did they move back? Was it left arm or right arm, leg, whole body? But if you are going to be to that level of description, you just need to be 100% sure. Just a simple thing like confirming the lane. Like I've actually been a starter, and there hasn't actually been a full deck of 10 swimmers in the event, and there's been a definite start before, and I've actually said the lane, and I've actually been wrong, and then the referee said the correct lane, and in that 5 seconds later I've gone, oh yeah, that was the wrong lane, but by then it's too late. So you've just got to make sure that you are on the same page, and just simple things like watch the swimmer in the water, wait till their head comes up and then look back and you'll see the lane number straight away. Like, are they on the top side of the yellow on the lane rope, or are they on the bottom side of the red? And a simple thing like, were all the swimmers stationary before you actually hit the start button? So as a starter, and as I've become starting a lot more at Soapback and on that little pathway there, someone actually said to me once, and you mentioned his name before, Andrew, the only person that thinks you're holding them a long time is you. So you've just got to make sure that they're actually stationary before you let them go, because that could give rise to a protest as well. Were they actually ready? Yes or no? And then consult with the referee in between the events and write down the notes on your program in preparation for a protest or a jury. I remember when I started senior state last year, I didn't have any start befores in the heats, and I only had one in the final, and they just took off on me. And I actually said to the referee, I don't think this one's going to go to protest, but if it does, my description is they took off like a dolphin, because they just launched straight up. So, and then again, with becoming a better referee, like did the reporting officials see it, or did they think they saw something? So if there's any doubt in what they're actually describing to you, or if they say think, or I thought, there's doubt straight away. As a referee, you just start to think, well, did they actually see it, or are they not sure? Are they just telling you the infraction? Are they just telling you the alphabet soup one, the head did not break before? Or are they actually describing what they saw, like did they do two full strokes under the water, where their arms on their chest before their head came out, those sort of things? Are they reporting the infraction in accordance with the rules? Was the official standing in the correct position? Were they confident in what they're reporting? Were they sure of their observations? Did the referee also see it, which is a good one as well? So often as a referee, in the first 2 or 3 lanes, you see things. So started before the starting signal was obvious, but then the head did not break before the hands in the breaststroke. I mean, that's an easy one to pick, particularly in lane 1 or 0. And completely submerged at the finish or the turn is an easy one to get to as a referee. So often in lane 1, 0, and sometimes 2, you can pretty well validate yourself what the official's telling you. And then just confirm that with your reporting official, tell them to make some notes of the program, and then deal with any coach queries. But just have enough information to let them go away and digest. Let them make the decision if they want to protest. Probably don't give them too much information, just keep some to yourself. Like if it's a non-simultaneous touch, just say it was non-simultaneous touch. You don't need to say left hand or right hand, how far away, under or over the water. If it was a start before the starting signal, just say, yeah, there was a start before the starting signal. And then don't be afraid to review any mobile phone footage that someone might have and consider it. So I've been a referee before, and you'll get a parent or a coach come and give you a mobile phone and say, can you just have a look at this for us? I just want to share this with you. And often they don't actually record the start light. So the first thing I say is, yes, okay, let's have a look at it, but I can see you don't have the start light. So that's important. But let's have a look at it anyway. And often you can actually see the movement, just even on a mobile phone, even though it's not overly clear. And that's enough to let them go away and say, okay, thanks for the explanation. And just before I hand to Faye, it's probably just a good segue here for Faye. So I was at Short Course Nationals last weekend, and protest is probably at an area meet and club. It's probably unlikely to happen. I think we've had one at area, Faye, you've said before. At state, it is common, probably more so at the state level, maybe senior rather than metro, and country. There's probably some there because it's a little bit different. But my observations from short course is it's very common. It's just part of the normal process. It's in the rules, part of sport. You see it on the bunker in the NRL and all that sort of stuff. From what I saw, there was roughly 30% of the infractions went to protest, and roughly 50 of those went to a jury and got upheld. So there's lots of passion on pool deck, lots of animation from some coaches I saw, because there's lots at stake, right? Because people are often getting disqualified from the heat, and it means that they're protesting to get into a final. So referees handled it differently from what I saw. Some were calm, some did show a bit of stress, and you could just tell in the way that they were then officiating the next race. And you saw the meet director walking around with protest forms, and you saw the referee walking around with forms. And the meet director would come and assemble the jury, because there was probably 3 FINA referees there from memory. And it takes a varied amount of time. Like one of the protests, I think, went up to an hour. So it's just all part of the normal part of our sport. And in someone that's relatively new, that's been involved in 2, I do remember when I was doing my level 2 referee pre-assessment, I went back and watched a protest webinar from last year that Faye did. And I went back a couple of years ago when I did the referee course, and I rewatched a lot of the stuff that Sherry went through. So in a bit of a segue to Faye now, Faye's actually going to take us through in a bit more detail from the FINA position and what we're talking about with these forms that I just mentioned. That's it, Josh.
Thanks so much, Brad. Thank you very much. Faye, over to you now.
Okay, great. That's really good information that both Brad and Andrew have provided us with their experiences. For those of you that don't know my background, I'm currently on the FINA list as a referee. I'm up to my 15th year of officiating at state and 20th year as a referee. So I've been around just a little while. And in that time, I've had protests at all levels. So I've even had a parent try to protest at just a club carnival. So, and I understand that there's been some at school meets as well. So it comes, as has been alluded to by both Andrew and Brad, protests come by because of the passion in the sport, the commitment that we have. Kids spend hours training for these races, so they've only got one chance at it, and if they're disqualified, then obviously if people are going to protest it, that option is there. So the things I wanted to talk to is, because Brad and Andrew have covered pretty much what to expect from a jury of appeal and protest, but the things that I wanted to talk about was something that Brad alluded to, and that is dealing with nerves and being in awe of the swimmer or the coach that you might have disqualified, but also the officials that you're working with. I've had people tell me that they feel intimidated when they need to tell me something. And I think that's purely because they know how long I've been around. So I've had an experience, and people probably know this, at international level. I was on a jury of appeal when Ben Proud was disqualified. So I was on the opposite side to that. I think Sherry was the referee that day. And I was on the jury of appeal with other FINA level officials. And I've also, at an international meet, reported a swimmer as an inspector of turns for a non-simultaneous touch at the turn in the breaststroke. That went to protest and jury of appeal at an international meet. At all levels, the process is pretty much the same. The only difference I found at the international level was that as the inspector of turns, I wasn't asked to go into the jury of appeal. It was only the referee that was. And that jury, the FINA jury, actually had every member of the current FINA panel on that jury. So it was about 20 people in the room. But at a national and state meet, there'll only ever be 3 people on a jury of appeal. So that's the only difference. The purpose of the protest and the jury appeal is always the same: to get the right decision made for the athlete. So whether we've made a mistake or not, that's what that process is about, is to make sure that the right decision has been made for that swimmer. So one of the things that I've always, one of the things I've worked really hard on over my years is to deal with nerves. The fact that you feel like you're being watched by the whole world, when I know I was when I reported for the FINA, because I was standing on TV and you could see me reporting to the referee. You know you're on display. So you've got to deal with the nerves that come with that, or the doubt that you might have in your own ability. And that sometimes impacts on the way that you present information to people. You might not seem as confident as what you should. So I think that's one of the things that I've worked really hard on, is to how to present information in a clear and consistent manner, and being confident, or having the appearance of being confident in doing that. So the strategies that I've put in place to deal with those sorts of things are knowing the rules. And Andrew mentioned that the questions he was asked by the jury, and what sort of questions you can be asked. So if you understand the rules and have a really good understanding of the rules, you're likely to know what sort of things that might be asked. So for example, if you've seen a swimmer not touch simultaneously at a turn, in the breaststroke or the butterfly, questions likely to be which hand touched first. The other question would be how far apart were they? At the FINA level, I was asked a question, was the hands above, below, or at the surface of the water? Because that's another rule in breaststroke. I wasn't expecting that one, and it took me a little while to respond to that question, but that's another strategy. So understanding the rules is key. So the other thing that I needed to learn to do is take my time. I used to rush my responses. I now take my time. I'm very considered in what I do. I double check my infraction reports. I double check my notes in my program. I check with my reporting official at what they've said, make sure that we've got similar things written in our programs, making sure lane numbers are correct, event numbers are correct, because they're all really important. And then also taking your time when you're having conversations with coaches. Take your time to build a relationship, take time to explain the infraction. And I liked what Brad said, you don't have to give them the whole story, just explain to them what you've observed or what has been observed, and tell them the process. And don't let the coach take you down a rabbit hole. Don't let the coach ask you lots of questions and take it down a different track. Just if you feel like, just answer the question with as little information as possible, just so that removes some of the doubt. So they're the two key strategies that I've been working really hard on. But the other thing is to be consistent. So what you tell the coach, so you've got to make sure that you're confident of your report and what's been reported to you as a referee, and what you tell the coach has to be the same information as you tell the jury, because once there becomes any kind of doubt in the process, the protest will be upheld and the swimmer reinstated. So making sure your evidence is consistent with everyone that you speak to is important. And the other, make sure that you don't add too much extra information. Once you start adding irrelevant or extra information, it allows that doubt to occur as well. So they're the really important things to remember. And the other thing is too, that the reporting official won't always be asked to attend a jury of appeal. It's really up to the jury of appeal who they speak to and in what order they speak to. There's no real rule. So as a reporting official, you may not even get asked to go to that jury of appeal. I've had an example, I spoke about being careful, checking lane numbers, examples like that. Had an example at a national meet where I was on the jury of appeal, and it was thrown out after we read the paperwork because the information on the protest form didn't match the information on the infraction. So there was immediate doubt. And so there was no interviews occurred. That was just overturned at that point. So even though there's a process to follow, it really depends on the evidence presented to the jury of appeal, who they'll be called, who will be called into that jury of appeal. And remember that you're not defending your decision. You might feel, some people feel a bit attacked, I guess, that their decision has been wrong. That's not the case. You're not defending your decision. You're providing clear, concise information so that you can ensure that the right decision's made. I know Andrew and Brad have both talked to video, and that's something very, it's a tricky one to do because you've got different types of videos taken from different angles, and not always will that video show any kind of evidence. And so it's important to consider that evidence, but take it as it is. It may not be able to be of much use at all. Having said all that, I thought I was asked also to share some protest forms because it was brought to my attention that some people weren't sure how to fill out forms, how much was too much information, how much was not enough information. So I'm just going to share a couple of protest forms. Hopefully I get this right. Bear with me for a minute. Right. I can't see what I'm showing, so.
That's the protest form. It's good. Yep.
Great. That's good. So I wanted to start with this protest form because it comes to my first point about being in awe of swimmers, or swimmers that are in the media, or swimmers that might be getting a little bit more attention than what others may be. And at this particular meet, this particular swimmer was front and centre for the media, was Cody Simpson. And Cody, this was starting before the starting signal protest. Both the starter and I saw the infraction. The movement, we both saw similar movement. We don't always see exactly the same. Obviously, we're different people, but it was the similar movement, upper body moving back and then forward. So as you can see, this is pretty simple. Cody appeals because he didn't move before the starting signal, and his coach is Michael Bowl. So he's one of the high level coaches in Australia. So you always want to get decisions right, but the other thing that I put a lot of emphasis in is trusting my officials. And as an official, all officials I know will only report if they're certain of what they've seen. So I trust my officials, and if I've observed, particularly as the starter, I will support them as, you know, just because that's what we've observed and that's the decision of fact, and we're going to go forward from there. Now, at the current time, under the current technical manager for Swimming Australia, referees aren't allowed to watch any kind of video as part of their consideration of the protest. So because we were so certain of what we saw, I pretty much filled out the form as, I'll just scroll down, hopefully. Hopefully people can see the second part of the form. So once again, had really carefully checked the event number, heat number, lane number, just that the swimmer started before the starting signal. I mentioned the rule, and it's important if you do mention the rule that you double check in the rule book that the rule number hasn't changed. Noted that it was observed by both the referee and the starter, and that it's a decision of fact. And you'll find most referees will write on the form that it's a decision of fact, because that's what the rule says. You can't protest against a decision of fact. And this is a decision of fact because we both observed it. Unfortunately, this particular protest was upheld, but that happens. And some friends of mine have said this to me for a long time, and it sticks with me. You need to let it go. And Elsa in Frozen song has been played to me a number of times. And so it is important to let it go and remember that what the decision the jury makes is the final decision, and you just need to move on from that. So that's one example. I've got another example. Hopefully this changes. No. Sorry, it doesn't look like it's working for me. So we'll move on from the next one. The previous one was one of Sherry's, and I want to acknowledge Sherry because I know she's on the meeting tonight. Some of these protest forms have been completed by Sherry, and some I've collected in my journeys, which is another thing that I would recommend to all officials, is to collect protest forms and keep them in a folder close by, because they will give you some hints around what to do, and particularly if you're nervous at the time. So this was a protest around a turn in an IM, and the swimmer wasn't on the breast. I think it was at the start of the breaststroke section. So there's quite a long description by the coach or the team manager of why they thought that their swimmer shouldn't be disqualified. But the referee's response was fairly simple, basically saying that after the verbal report from the inspectors turns and reviewing the video replay, I dismissed the protest based on the decision of fact that the swimmer was still on the back after the feet had left the wall at the start of the breaststroke leg. Now, this is quite an old infraction group protest form. It was written in 2012. So some of the wording isn't in line with the current rules, but it's a good example of some the basic information that you would put in a protest form. Let's see if the next one works. So this is a breaststroke. Same thing again, quite a lengthy description of why the team manager thought that the swimmer shouldn't be disqualified. This one is one of Sherry's reports. So she's put that after investigation and questioning of the 3 technical officials involved with the disqualification, mentioning the event number, lane number, that the butterfly kick was executed before the commencement of the arm stroke, which is also an old rule. It's not a current rule. And she's added that she'd also observed it, and so the protest was rejected. So it's just keeping the information fairly simple. Now the other, I think this last one is a completely submerged one, but the reason I have this one is because the referee has actually rejected the protest and it hasn't gone to jury of appeal. So it's important to remember that not all protests go to jury of appeal, and some coaches and team managers will accept a referee's decision. So it's important as referees to make sure you review all the evidence that you've got available to you, to make sure that you're confident that what has been reported to you or what you have observed is the right decision. The other one's blank as well. Sorry about that. So I think listening to Andrew and Brad's stories actually gave a good recount of what happens in juries of appeal and protests. And if anybody's got any questions, just let us know.
I've actually got two, Faye. I've actually got two. It's Andrew here.
Oh.
So one, I'll ask them both and you can answer. One, and just a very quick one, is around my question around asking about skin colour and the potential for that to introduce unconscious bias. And the second one is when someone shows you a video taken from a mobile phone, how do you validate that they're actually showing you the race that the swimmer was in, rather than just taking their word for it? Thanks, mate.
Both very good questions, Andrew. I wouldn't ask regarding skin colour simply because of what you've suggested, introducing bias into the conversation. I've never actually been asked that question. I have been asked if I could see the swimmer's soles of their feet, but never, things like that, but never skin colour. It's usually colour of costume, colour of cap, because that is helpful to identify an athlete.
And about validating the
the video. Yeah. So that is
difficult one, I think.
Very difficult. I've been in a protest where the referee had used video, and it was a medley relay. And when I asked the referee afterwards, as you have those conversations, which are always really good for learning and validation of what you've seen and what you haven't seen, I asked what stroke the swimmer was doing in the video coming up to the turn, and the swimmer in the video was doing the wrong stroke. So I watched the breaststroke touch, and it was the swimmer wasn't coming into the wall, wasn't doing breaststroke. So they'd actually watched the wrong turn on the video. So I guess that's one of the points I was trying to make, being very careful and thinking about your report and infraction. But I very rarely will accept looking at video on a mobile phone because the screen's too small. And unless you've got a good recollection of how many lanes were full in that heat, those sorts of things, they're the sorts of things I would use to validate video. How many swimmers are in the lanes? Just from a little bit from memory as well. If you've quite often, if you've got an infraction in a race, you have quite good recall of that particular race and that particular event, or I find I do. So they're the sorts of things that I would look at to validate, but I very rarely, I will look at it because that's evidence available to me, but very rarely it would be valid evidence for me.
Thanks, Faye. We've just got one more question in the chat before we move on, mindful of the time. Andrus has asked, does a jury decision need to be unanimous?
Yes. That's a pretty simple answer. Yes, it does.
Cool. All right. Well, there are any more questions? And As I said, mindful of the time, it's 20 to 9. So if nothing comes through in the next few seconds, we'll just get started again with part 2 with Andrew. And I don't envisage everyone can be rest assured it probably won't go as long as the protest series of appeal discussion, but it will be really interesting. And so yeah, stick around. Don't see any more questions, so we'll get started, Andrew, and thank you again, Faye.
Cool. Thanks, Josh. Goalball. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands because I'm going to guess that a lot of people have never heard or seen it. So what I am going to do quite quickly is try and show a 2-minute video so you all know what I'm talking about. I might just get Josh just to start broadcast, screen broadcast. Okay, just getting it up. So hopefully you can see my screen in a sec.
Yeah, that looks good.
I'm going to go here and here, and this will show you what goalball is. That all good, Josh?
Yeah.
Goalball was devised in 1946 as a rehabilitation activity for visually impaired World War II veterans. It was introduced to the world at the 1976 Paralympic Games in Toronto and is played by both men's and women's teams. Goalball is exclusively for athletes with a visual impairment. To be eligible, athletes have less than 10% vision remaining or a visual field restricted to 20 degrees. Participants wear blackout masks whilst on court that cannot be touched unless permitted by the referee. The court is 18 metres by 9 metres. Each team's goal stretches the entire width and is 1.3 metres high. The hard rubber ball has a diameter of 25 centimetres. 2 bells inside the ball help orientate the players of the direction of the oncoming ball. The string placed under court lines also give the players orientation. Whilst play is in progress, complete silence is required in the venue to allow the players to react to the ball. The object of the game is to roll the ball into the opposite goal, whilst opposing players try to block the ball with their bodies. There are 3 players per team on court at any time, with a maximum of 3 substitutes. Each match consists of 2 12-minute halves separated by a 3-minute break. Teams have 10 seconds from first defensive contact to get the ball across the centre court line. The game is won by scoring the most goals in the allotted time, or if one team leads the other, by 10 goals. A tournament begins with a round-robin phase. The top 4 teams from each group will progress through to the quarter-final and semi-final elimination matches as they strive to reach the final. Goalball is unique. The hush of the crowd and the high degree of skill, tactics and split-second player reactions create a spectacular sport.
Here you are. So now, oops, try and get back. Stop sharing. All right, back with you. Cool, thanks, Josh. So, my broadcast is stopped. Okay. All right. So that's goalball. It's a Paralympic sport. There were a number of officials there. The ones probably to focus on, which you may not have picked up, is there's one official on each side. There are officials at goals, so goal judges. There's one official on each side of the court, and they're the 2 referees, and they work together. So in terms of officiating, there are level 1, level 2 and level 3 referees. To officiate at the Paralympics, you need to be a level 3 referee. When it comes to Paralympic sport, I've just spent the last 2 days, Monday and Tuesday, up at a Paralympics Australia conference on the Gold Coast, where they're preparing for, so I had all the coaches, actually I was there as my capacity as Australian men's coach, all the coaches there with the Paralympics Australia people. It's about 70 of us, and that was all about planning and preparing for Paris 2024. Unfortunately, I think my men have very little chance of actually qualifying. They're quite young, but I was there really. It's about the future, and it's about Brisbane coming up in 2032. So we're thinking about 2032. I would encourage some of you to think about 2032 and potential for yourselves to officiate at either the Olympics in swimming. There's plenty of time, or even the Paralympics. I'm very much into the Paralympic sports. I think they're fantastic, what they can do, and they break down barriers. The Paralympics Australia spoke a lot about just some of the metrics and the media and things, and it's quite amazing how it's breaking down barriers. And over time, hopefully that will translate more into society. So removing that unconscious bias around jobs and those sorts of things. But yeah, certainly if you get an opportunity to officiate as a swimming referee at a multi-class meet, which I think may just be at the Australian or the national level, or even so take it, or embrace officiating at multi-class events at any of the meets that you're at. All right, so to be a referee in goalball, it's a little bit easier than swimming in terms of time. So I was a last minute entry in 2018 to the course. There were 10 of us on the course. There was someone flown in from overseas, a qualified instructor to run the course. I'd refereed a couple of games, so literally 1 or 2 games before. I read the rules in the aeroplane on the way to the course. Set the course for the day, and they took us through the whole refereeing course and all the books. We then had a written exam, which I passed, and we then had practical assessments. So during games, and I passed that as well. So bang, I was a level 1 referee. It's a little bit quicker and a little bit easier than swimming. To maintain that, I need to referee at least 8 games per year. To be a level 2 referee, it's the same rules. I just need to get more of them right. Instead of, I think it's 80%, I think I need to get 90% of them right. Obviously, they're going to judge you a little bit harsher when it comes to the practical refereeing. The other thing is, once you're a level 2 referee, you have to have, again, I think it's 8, referee at least 8 games per year locally. And at least 8 games per year overseas. So that's then a very big commitment. You would need to travel at least once, if not twice a year, to actually referee 8 international games to maintain your level 3. And then it goes up again in level 3. So I guess I was just there, just very quickly wanted to, for those that aren't aware or might be interested, just flick to Faye and just for a comment on I guess swimming and any parallels there in terms of swimming around the different levels. If people are thinking about Paralympics or Olympic officiating in 10 years' time in Sydney or any other time, Faye, whether there was any thoughts or advice on that pathway?
There is. So to officiate at an international meet or to referee or start at an international meet, it only applies to referees and starters, not other officials. You need to be on the FINA list. To be on the FINA list, you need to be a level 3, so a national level referee or starter. And you have to have some international experience, but that can be Pan-Pacific Games or attending, like we were lucky enough to have the Commonwealth Games, things like that. So there's certainly not as big of a commitment to travel overseas. But I do know Sherry and Murray, I think, are both on in terms of Paralympic swimming. There's specific international courses, and they're usually conducted overseas and are quite stringent to be able to reach that level.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So the rules are reviewed every 4 years, so we need to recertify. So in about 3 or 4 weeks' time, we've got our national championships, and we have a international certifier coming out to run the course again. So I'll need to recertify that, so re-go through the rules, retake the test, and I do have the opportunity because I've spent at least 3 years now as a referee, a level 1 referee. I do have the opportunity to sit for level 2. I guess the challenge at my stage in life and with swimming and everything else I do is those overseas trips and actually officiating at those to keep it up. But it's something I might consider. Actually, no, I can't, because I think to do the level 2, I need to go overseas, do it overseas, so I can't do that. All right, so some just some specific things about goalball, and it's not specific to goalball, other sports as well, is unlike swimming, you do have coaches, and a coach as well, throwing their arms up, trying to get attention for things that they believe where rules have been broken. I won't go into specifics around rules, it'll take too long. You need to make your decision immediately. So think about a no ball in cricket. As soon as that bowler steps over that no ball line, you need to call it. If you don't, and the batsman gets bowled, it's too late. And you've done that player, that batsman, a disservice. So decisions are immediate. Interestingly, it's not written in the rules, which I think it should be, that the benefit of the doubt goes to the thrower as to whether they've thrown a legal ball or not. And I won't go into what a legal ball is. You saw what they are. They're generally bouncing along. You can't throw it on the full, for example. So what that heightens is, and Brad spoke a little bit about pool deck excitement, is there's a lot of excitement for the coaches. Interestingly, the first couple of games over in Bahrain, we had a regional championships a month ago. I sat quietly. I didn't throw my arms about, which sometimes I can. And I felt that the referees paid attention to the opposition. So the next game, I was far more animated. I was throwing my arms around, and it was interesting to see that once or twice the referee would put their whistle to the mouth, and then they put it down. It's certainly something you don't want to see. Is something outside of what's going on in terms of the actual rules of the game influencing a referee. But it's as soon as you see it happen as a coach, you go in for the kill. This is international sport. I'm trying to defend and protect my players, and I'm trying to win fairly within the rules. But yeah, I don't want to do that. I don't want to gesticulate. But when you see it having an impact, I think I'm doing my players a disservice. I know. So just be aware of that type of thing. You don't get it so much in swimming. The next thing I want to go on to quite quickly is protests. So it's quite similar in terms of protests. You have 30 minutes, you have to put in your €100. There's a protest committee of, I believe it's 3. They can use video, and I think do use video. The interesting thing for a protest to be upheld is 2 things need to happen. Firstly, it needs to be proven that there was a officiating error. But that won't guarantee that it's going to be upheld. The second is that the game was impacted or potentially impacted as a result. If it is, then what happens is, and a protest, of course, can be up to 13 minutes later, and then there's the jury and everything else. What can then happen is the game goes back and gets replayed from the point of the protest. So this could be an hour or 2 after the game. Players can go back and replay it. And I have seen it happen on television in a World Championships in a playoff game for about 5th versus 6th. And it was about the last 10 seconds of a game, and the protest was upheld, and they went back and they replayed, an hour or 2 after the game, the last 10 seconds of the game. The second last thing I want to say about it is I did have an opportunity to protest when we were in Bahrain. The circumstances was we were playing Thailand. We were down 7-3. It was early in the second half, and this one was quite unusual. I saw the ball going through the air, and it looked distorted. It looked out of shape, which it can actually do. But something didn't look right. So I started gesticulating. Of course, I'm not allowed to say anything or make any noise, but to the referees that the ball's not round, trying to sort of indicate to the referee. So they stopped the game. They took an official timeout, it's called, and they checked the ball and went, no, it's fine. This was early in the second half. A few minutes later, it was still 7-3. They scored a goal to go to 8-3. And what happened was the ball was going along the ground, rolling along the ground, very fast, and then it's just jumped. It's jumped up off the ground. And balls don't do that. That's against the laws of physics for a round object. And of course, I was fairly animated at that point, feeling the wrong. But anyway, we played on, and then with about 2 minutes to go, remember it's a 12-minute half, so we've been playing about 7 or 8 minutes with this ball that I'm not really happy with. The ball gets dropped in, and my player on the wing recognised there was something wrong with the ball. He felt around the ball. The ball's actually made of two hemispheres glued together, and there was a crack in the ball, and he just put his hands in the crack and he just pulled the ball in half. I wasn't impressed with the referees. I've been telling them for quite some time there's an issue, and I, without going against I was probably bordering on the spirit, but I definitely let the referees know that clearly I'd been right. Clearly they had made a very significant error. So did I protest or not? So the answer is no. I have very little doubt that I would have been successful, that this was an officiating error. That from early in the second half, the ball was broken. However, we were already down 7-3. We ended up losing 11-3. I knew that it didn't impact the result, maybe the magnitude of the result, possibly. And as a result, I would not have been successful. So I didn't waste my €100. Another one just to bear in mind, and I guess maybe speaks a little bit to Faye. It can be quite sort of nerve-wracking being, not that Faye was like this, but having a protest against you is in the Youth World Championships, there was a protest and I was there. I happened to be commentating on live stream, and the officials were in the area that I was in, and the official who had been protested against was in tears. Was sobbing, was highly upset about it. So I think it was really good to hear Faye talk about some of those techniques, because it can be very daunting, especially when the swimmers are very, it's a big event and the swimmers are very well-known swimmer. That can be very daunting. So I think carefully about what Faye's tips there around how you manage that. And the last thing I'd say is, and in part as a referee, which you all know, in part as a coach, and in part as I've played quite a lot of cricket, captained a lot of cricket teams as a captain, is what I would say to you is know the rules. And I know you've heard it, but as a cricket captain, I would really be very annoyed with an umpire in cricket who didn't know the rules. If they gave what I thought was a dodgy LBW or a dodgy call behind, that's a judgment. And that to me is different. I don't agree with it, obviously, sometimes, but the one that I felt was inexcusable was not to know the rules. And Josh, that's kind of, I think, in a snapshot, what I wanted to go through.
Fascinating. Thanks, Andrew. Thank you very much. It was really interesting. I'd like to hear more about it, and your journey as the coach, the head coach of the men's team. It'd be interesting to see how that goes. But yeah, thank you again. We haven't got any questions as yet, but I will say if anyone has any questions for any of the presenters tonight, just flick them to me and I can pass them on and we'll get back to you for sure. We do have one thing. We've got Chris Hayes from the TSC. He just mentioned to me that he wanted to clarify his response to a question. So Andrews's question about a jury decision being unanimous for New South Wales jury. So I'll get Chris to pop on off mute if he wants to just mention something.
Yeah, you're right. Everyone here. Yeah, just going back on that one, I think Faye was giving us the phenotype response for that decision thing. That maybe have to be unanimous at that level. In New South Wales, our procedure is for a majority decision. So just when you go from there, and guys, I think probably a really good exercise with Andrew and Brad, but everyone else have a look at that protest and jury of appeal protocols and procedures in the technical official resources area, where there is a lot of other stuff that people should be following, and particularly as we get into things like multi-class and that, all the information is in there as to our procedures. And again, that protest one's in there. So I just thought better just make sure you know what's going on in the New South Wales jury. That's all. But thanks, Josh.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you. The resources page, I'm just going to post a link to everybody here. I'm sure a lot of you know of the page, but you know, we do have a lot of content on our website, so it might be difficult to find. So just posting the link now. But yeah, there is an entire technical officials section on our website, so I encourage you guys to have a look through it if you have a spare 2 weeks. But yeah, feel free to use any of the information there. And not to mention, this webinar will be, we've recorded it, hopefully next, or by the end of tomorrow, it should be up online on the training courses and events section of the website. So yeah, feel free to, or I'd encourage you guys to share it with other officials that weren't on the call tonight, or even even with your club. But yeah, so thank you very much once again to Andrew, Brad and Faye for their time. We all really appreciate them sharing their knowledge and experiences. I hope you've either learned something or had your eyes opened in some way. But yeah, please feel free to email me with any feedback on the webinar. The TSC and I would really appreciate that. Looking ahead, we have our second webinar taking place on the 22nd of September, and that's with another FINA referee, Ken Jones. So that's going to be really good as well. Check out the Swimming New South Wales events page and register there, just as you did for this one, and keep your eye out for the third one as well, which will be presented by Daryl Durham. That should be published within the next week. Keep your eye out on the same page to register, and that will be in mid to late October. We're just setting a final date for that. So yeah, finally, thank you all for joining us tonight and taking the time out of your week. Remember, the recording will be up tomorrow, so send it on to other people. But other than that, thank you and enjoy the rest of your evenings. Thanks everyone.
Josh. Thanks everyone.
Thanks, Josh.
Bye,
Bye.
guys.
Thanks all.